In the previous video, I spoke about inflation. In this video, I will speak about excess inflation, extreme form of inflation, which we call hyperinflation. So we understood inflation to be the general increase in the prices of basic goods and services. And what we use to illustrate the phenomenon of inflation, something that we experience often whenever we leave our houses to go to the school or to go to our work, is the money that we pay to our jeepney drivers when we want to go to work or to school. And in Facebook, many people are fond of recalling that in the old days, we were only paying something like 25 centavos as minimum fare. After 40 years, it has risen to something like 11 pesos. So why is this an illustration of inflation? Well, transportation is a basic service and it has risen in cost. Our minimum fares had risen from something like 25 centavos when I was in grade school to something like 11 pesos now. So this inflation is accompanied by the reduction in the purchasing power of money. So let's say, for example, you have 100 pesos today, 2020, and let's say, for example, the average annual inflation rate in our country is something like 3%. So the purchasing power of 100 pesos will have been reduced to 97 pesos after 1 year, 94 pesos after 2 years, 91 pesos after 3 years, and after 10 years, the purchasing power of 100 pesos will have been reduced to 74 pesos. So when you look at your money, it is still 100 pesos. But it can no longer buy you the basic services and the basic goods, the full quantity that your 100 pesos used to buy you 10 years earlier. The ideal range for inflation rate is somewhere between 1% to 9%. The ideal inflation rate ought to be a one-digit inflation rate. And one of the marks of an economy that is being managed properly and soundly is an economy where the inflation rate is a one-digit inflation rate. And I am happy to announce to you that actually our inflation rate for the past 10 or even 20 years had been less than 10%. In fact, for the last 5 years, it's been around 2.4%. Now, what is hyperinflation? Hyperinflation is inflation that exceeds 50% a month. Just to demonstrate to you, just to illustrate to you what it means to live in an economy where the inflation rate is 50% a month. So let's say, for example, let us begin with January. Okay, so let us use again the minimum fare to illustrate what's going to happen to the minimum fare if we are living in an economy where the inflation rate exceeds 50%. So let's begin with January. So let's say, for example, today is January and the minimum fare is 11 pesos. If the inflation rate is 50% a month, by the next month, 11 pesos will have risen to 16.5 pesos. By March, it would have risen to 24.75 pesos. By the end of the year, December, the minimum fare, which began at 11 pesos, will have risen to 951 pesos by the end of the year. So that is how quickly the minimum fare will rise if we live in an environment where the inflation is hyperinflation, where inflation is at least 50% a month. Inflation is accompanied by the reduction of the purchasing power of money. And so the reduction in the purchasing power of money is going to be truly dramatic and extreme if we live in hyperinflation. So, if in the first month, January, the cost of 1 kilo of pork, for example, is 250 pesos. After 1 month, it will have risen to 375 pesos. After 3 months, it's going to be more. And after 1 year, you may have to bring bundles of money, okay, this much money, just to pay for 1 kilo of pork. This is why the popular picture of an economy where there is hyperinflation is to put these things side by side. A pile of money and one roll of tissue paper. You need to bring bundles and bundles of money just to buy something that is so trivial, something which is so ordinary, such as a toilet paper. Did we experience hyperinflation in our history? Yes, we did, but we experienced it only briefly. In 1984, we experienced an inflation rate of 50.8%. So that is considered hyperinflation. And it's in 1984. It happened 1 year after the assassination of Ninoy Aquino. So 1984, 1983, 1984, 1985, 1986, those were tumultuous years in our country. And for a brief period in 1984, our inflation rate shot up to 50.8%. But it went back to lower rates. In 1984, it went back to something like 20%. And then in 1985, it went back to a rate that is below 10%. The country that is reeling deep into super hyperinflation is Venezuela. Venezuela is a country in South America. Just how hyper is the hyperinflation in Venezuela? Well, guess what? It is 10,398% a year. That is the inflation rate in Venezuela. Compare it to our inflation rate of 2.4% a year. But theirs is 10,398% per year. So let us suppose we are under hyperinflation of 10,398% a year. So let us look into what's going to be the minimum fare if we live in this kind of environment. Let's say, for example, today, the minimum fare is 11 pesos. If we live in an economy where the inflation rate is 10,398% a year, after 1 year, we will multiply 11 pesos by the decimal form of this one. It's 103.98. So after 1 year, our minimum fare will have risen to 1,143 pesos. In the previous year, you only had to bring 11 pesos. But in an economy under hyperinflation, after 1 year, you had to bring a lot of money just to pay for your minimum fare, 1,143 pesos.